He stood quietly outside the cafe, hands tucked into the pockets of his hoodie, waiting for his ride. The evening breeze carried the sound of car horns, footsteps, and the chatter of people heading home. To most, he was just another face in the city crowd. But to one man, he was something else entirely. Red and blue lights flashed suddenly, breaking the calm. A squad car screeched to a halt, and out stepped a white officer, his eyes narrowed, his voice sharp with authority. "You don't belong here," he sneered, his words laced with disdain. "Loitering. Hands behind your back." The young black man lifted his head, his deep brown skin catching the glow of the streetlight, his short fade haircut neat, his neatly groomed beard making him look older than his 29 years. He opened his mouth to explain. He wasn't loitering. He was waiting for his ride. But the officer didn't care. The cold bite of handcuffs snapped shut on his wrists before his words could leave his lips. People on the sidewalk stopped. Some shook their heads, whispering. Others just looked away. And through it all, the officer smirked, convinced he had put a troublemaker in his place. To him, it was just another routine arrest, another night of flexing power. But what he didn't know was that life has a way of flipping the script. Hours later, after booking his suspect on a bogus charge, the officer drove home, his chest puffed with arrogance, his mind replaying the look on the young man's face as he locked the cuffs. He felt untouchable, powerful. But as he turned a corner in downtown, his smug grin froze. Towering above the street was a massive glowing billboard. The sight made his stomach drop. There, larger than life, was the same man he had humiliated just hours earlier. Gone was the hoodie and sneakers. On the billboard, he wore a sharp navy blue tailored suit, crisp white shirt, silk tie, and Rolex watch. His confident smile radiated power and success. And above him, bold glowing letters declared, "Meet our new CEO." The officer's hands gripped the steering wheel tight, his blue eyes wide with disbelief. The man he had treated like a criminal wasn't some nobody. He wasn't loitering. He wasn't powerless. He was a new CEO of the very bank that funded the precinct's salaries. Justice didn't come in a courtroom that night. It came in a glow of city lights, in the image of a man who refused to be broken, standing taller than ever. But that was only the beginning. The next morning, the officer tried to brush it off. He told himself it was coincidence, bad luck, a fluke, but whispers spread fast. By the time he walked into the precinct, smirks were already waiting for him. Fellow officers nudged each other, some chuckling under their breath. "That's the guy you cuffed last night, right?" The new CEO, his pale face flush red, the authority he wore like armor, suddenly felt paper thin. For the first time in years, he felt small. Meanwhile, across town, the young CEO stepped into his new office. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched behind him, flooding the room with sunlight. Assistants greeted him with respect. Colleagues spoke his name with admiration. But behind his calm smile, he carried a memory, the sting of the cuffs, the humiliation of being paraded like a criminal for simply waiting outside a cafe. He didn't crave revenge. He didn't want to destroy the officer. But he knew something the officer didn't. Life always circles back. Days later, the precinct received a notice. Mandatory training, funded and enforced by the bank's new leadership. Attendance required for all officers. Some groaned, others shrugged. But the officer who made that arrest, his stomach sank. He had a feeling, and he was right. When the officers filed into the training hall, the room fell silent. At the podium stood the same man the officer had cuffed, dressed immaculately in a navy suit, his presence commanding without effort. His voice rang clear, steady, powerful. "Before you put someone in chains," he said, his gaze sweeping across the room, "make sure you're not binding yourself to shame." The officer shifted uncomfortably in his seat, sweat rolling down his neck. Around him, the room erupted in applause. The man he had mocked was now the one teaching him what power really meant. Not the kind that comes from a badge or a gun, but the kind that comes from dignity, wisdom, and resilience. But the story didn't end there. Weeks passed, and the whispers only grew louder. The officer could feel respect slipping away, replaced with ridicule and distrust. Neighbors gave him looks, co-workers snickered, and even strangers seemed to recognize him. His arrogance had been shattered. The badge no longer shielded him. It exposed him. One afternoon, he was called into the captain's office. Sitting across the desk wasn't just a superior. It was the CEO, the same man he once threw in cuffs. The officer's throat tightened, his palms sweaty. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. The CEO's voice was calm, but carried the weight of authority. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. Your badge was meant to protect, not to profile. The silence that followed was suffocating. The captain slid a paper across the desk. Termination papers. His career was over. The officer sat there in stunned silence, the reality hitting him like a wave. The power he once abused was gone, stripped away in the most public, humiliating way possible. Meanwhile, outside that office, the CEO walked through the city streets, greeted with respect and admiration. People shook his hand, called him a leader, thanked him for his strength. The man once labeled as loitering was now a symbol of resilience and justice. And the officer, he became a cautionary tale, a reminder whispered in training halls and city streets. Arrogance and prejudice can destroy not only those you target, but your own future too. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that matter. And let's keep the conversation going.